Everyone, welcome back to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. It is another Kansas deep dive. You know, we are almost through the Kansas catalog. I want to welcome back Davey Cretin from Cretin Classics. He's sitting in with me again on this one. And I have to mention this. I have to make mention of this because as this is airing, this is 10 years to the day that my first Tim's Vinyl Confessions episode aired back in 2014, August 31st, 2014. And if people were watching back then, the subject of my very first episode was Kansas. I went through my Kansas vinyl that I had up to that point. The whole reason I called the channel Tim's Vinyl Confessions is because this is one of my favorite bands. Now, back then, I had no idea that I would have put out a book on Kansas. Thank you, Davey. Let It Be Your Guide, the Kansas album review. It is a readable version, kind of what we're doing here. And so Davey guested on our episode that we talked about In the Spirit of Things. He's back for, I think this was a very nice surprise. I did not see this coming, but in the year 2000, this album appeared. I read about it in Classic Rock magazine first. That's how I was even aware it was out. Somewhere to Elsewhere. This came out on Magna Carta Records, which makes sense. It's a well-known prog label. And the idea here is this is the original 6 Kansas guys back together, still with Billy Greer staying on bass. I'm glad they didn't put him to the side, but it's Kerry Livgren's back. Kerry Livgren wrote every song on this album. Dave Hope's back on bass. Of course, Robbie Steinhardt had already rejoined the band on violin and vocals. So you've got Phil Ehart on drums, Richard Williams on guitar, Steve Walsh on vocals, and still Billy Greer on bass and the occasional lead vocal. This album was a very, very nice surprise. I listened to this album a lot. Now, I had no idea when this came out, this would be the last Kansas album of new material for 16 long years, but it's still a good album. And of course, being on a smaller label, didn't chart. I have no idea how it sold. I'm guessing not very well, but I go back to it fairly regularly, and I'm really a big fan of it. So Davey and I are going to go back and talk about each of the tracks on the album. What was your impression when this album came out? How did you find out this album was coming out?
At the time, I was working at a record store, and I had a connection at Magna Carta Records because I'm a big fan of progressive rock. And this guy I knew there would send me early promotional CDs before the albums were released. So I don't remember how long exactly, but a month or two before the record came out, I had a copy with a punch through it, right through the UPC symbol, through the barcode, like this on your book, had a big punch through it. It was a promotional copy, and I fell in love with this album when I heard it. I thought this was the Kansas that wasn't on the last record that we did, In the Spirit of Things, because this album has Kerry Livgren writing all the songs.
Yeah.
So this is the Kansas album everyone was waiting for, that the diehard 70s prog fans wanted, and they got. So it's great they got back together for this record. And oddly enough, this actually did chart on the top internet albums in the US at number 13 in the year 2000, and the top independent US albums at number 21 in the year 2000. This is the longest up to this point Kansas studio record at 68 minutes long, and not counting Not Always the Same, or Always Never the Same, sorry. If you discount Always Never the Same, this is their 13th studio record.
Yeah, I don't count Always Never the Same because it's mostly older material.
Right.
That was actually, you know what, I deliberated on that a lot for the book. I was going to have a chapter dedicated to it, but I thought there's just not enough here to talk about. So I shoehorned the new songs into the chapter on this album. Yeah, it's a long album, but it doesn't feel like a long album to me. And to me, that's a sign of a good album where it flows really well. I think that it's paced well. So let's get through the songs. First of all, actually, before we do that, I do want to read what's written on the inside here, and it plays off of this album cover. It says, to honor those who served in the United States military during World War II, Kansas will donate a portion of the CD's profits to the World War II Memorial Fund. Now, that's great, but I have to wonder how much did the CD sell for them to donate You know what I mean? Like how much of the portion of the profits got to where it was supposed to go. I'd like to think that it sold decently in, in fan circles. I can't imagine any longtime fan being disappointed in this because I mean, who doesn't, no matter what band it is, who doesn't want their original band back together? Very few people that have a segment of fans that will almost take nothing but. Now, as it turns out, it was a one-off, but it's a good one.
Great one.
And, the curious thing about this album is that all of Steve Walsh's vocals are done remotely. So that shows you how technology had changed to that point. Now, it doesn't sound like it, I don't think. It doesn't sound like a victim of its early technology where he sounds like he's singing from inside a cave. But it's just an interesting fact about the album. Also, he doesn't have any thank yous on this album, which I kind of think is interesting. But
it's weird.
Yeah. Also, this is kind of rare. The cassette of Somewhere to Elsewhere, this is on SPV, and this was made in Germany, which is interesting. And it doesn't even have a J card. It's more of a C card or a U card because there's no holes in this. Which towards the end of the run, when they were stopped making cassettes in the 2000s, that's what they were doing. There was no punch holes like that. Anyway, I digress.
Now cassettes are back.
Yeah, who would have thought? So let's get into it. First track, Icarus II. Now, I wrote this in the chapter on Somewhere to Elsewhere. I think this is a great track. It's sort of become an instant classic. They still play it live once in a while. But when you call it Icarus II, it's almost inviting. It almost puts too much pressure on the new song. You know what I mean? Because Icarus Born on Wings of Steel is such a beloved classic. I think this song holds up on its own and could have almost had its own title. What do you think about?
Oh, I do too. I wrote down it's a spiritual sequel to Icarus Born on Wings of Steel from 75's Mask album. And it has great keyboard work because Walsh only sings on this record. He doesn't play any of the keyboards. So it's all Kerry Livgren on keyboards and guitar. And of course, Rich Williams plays guitar too. But this song, it's very proggy. It's over 7 minutes long, has a great piano intro. And then you get Steinhardt's violin coming in, which that's Kansas. Yep. You have Livgren's songwriting. You have Walsh's voice, who, although it was faltering at the time, Livgren knew how to tweak it in the studio where you could say maybe he doesn't sound as good as the 70s, but he still sounds very good on the album. So the songwriting, the vocals, and the violin, and that's Kansas. And that's what was missing on the record that we did last month, In the Spirit of Things.
Yeah. And I think they got a good performance out of Steve on this album too. Live could be a little shaky, but I think he sounds good on this album. When it's new material, you're not having to sound like something that was already recorded. You can sing it however you want. I remember thinking when the middle section comes and Robbie goes, "Here they come," and it goes into that heavy riff, I was like, wow, this kind of reminds me of Dream Theater a little bit. Like, this is heavy.
And I thought at the time Iron Maiden, it reminded me of Maiden, even though I'm also a huge Dream Theater fan.
Yeah, but it's got a heavy section. It's a great song. And what I like is that typically now, if they do this song, they'll immediately follow it with Icarus Born on Wings of Steel. So,
and I saw them do both songs back to back. I have seen them do that, which was great.
Yeah, I can't see them doing this and not following it up with the original Icarus. So, if you go to Kansas concert and they start the piano melody of this, automatically what you're going to hear next, which is cool. Next up is it's a little bit more of a standard rock song, When the World Was Young. Great. I love the guitar that starts this one off. What are your thoughts on this one?
I'd say this record has cojones compared to In the Spirit of Things, which sort of felt a little castrated, pardon my French, but this album Livgren knows how to produce Kansas because it was his band. Yeah. And the guy's a musical genius. He's my favorite American prog songwriter. Even though I'm a big Spock's Beard and Neil Morse fan, I think Livgren was there first and he's the best. And when you have Livgren in this band, that's when you have the real Kansas. And this song is rocking. It's got great guitar work. It's upbeat, has killer vocal by Walsh. And I love how they quote part of Magnum Opus in the song.
Yep.
And this is one of the
just enough. No, they don't overdo it, but just enough.
The first time I heard it, I was like, "What? What's that?" Oh, they're quoting themselves. I thought that's very cool, and only a genius like Livgren could come up with that and make it work and make it fit into the song seamlessly. That's what's so good about it. And this is one of the 2 tracks on the record that has Dave Hope playing bass.
Yeah, and that.
So I don't think Philly Greer is on this track. This is the only track he's not on.
And Dave, all of those guys, I say this a lot in the book, none of these guys individually get the props they deserve for being such great musicians. And Dave Hope never gets mentioned in terms of great bass players, but he is one.
Especially on the early records, those early Kansas records.
Yeah, Journey from Marybron. We could go on and on, but the next one is interesting. It's a kind of a pun, but I like puns. Grand Finale. Grand Finale. Y'all get it?
Yeah. Huh? That's what anyway, I have that written in my notes. Yes.
Yeah. This is a play on words. I like this. I like it when they let Robbie take a vocal. I like Robbie's vocals.
So do I. There are people that don't. They only want to hear Walsh. They don't want to hear Robbie. But I love bands with more than one vocalist. Styx, Fleetwood Mac, even Kiss had 4 vocalists
absolutely,
in the early days. But it adds a nice diversity and a mix to the music, so you're getting a different flavor. So I love Steinhardt's voice. It's different than Walsh's, and he does a great job. This is very much a blues rocker. It's not sort of boogie that they used to do in the early days. It's more of a pure blues, the way they sing it. And then Walsh joins in on the chorus. So they sound good together still. It's not my favorite song on the record, but it's not one I would skip. It's a decent song.
Yeah, I really like it. I mean, I even like it despite the fact it's got words like humdinger and doozy in it. But that's all right. Next up, this is a really dramatic song. It's a slower song. The Coming Dawn, Thanatopsis. I'm saying that right. This sounds like a classic Kansas sort of slower opus type song.
It's a good ballad, and it's a stately ballad. Has a great performance by Walsh on the vocals on it. And I looked up the word Thanatopsis, and it basically means a consideration of death. And it's from a poem by, let me get his name right here. American poet William Cullen Bryant wrote a poem called Thanatopsis. So it's a consideration of death. So if you think that maybe this is another loosely based concept record where Icarus is about World War II and fighter pilots, you could say perhaps that this is about the death of a fighter pilot, the consideration of their death. So if you want to put this loosely into the concept, you can.
And unlike In the Spirit of Things, you can easily fit that in. Next up is one of my favorite songs in the album. Myriad. I really like this one. To me, this is classic prog with some elements that I've never heard Kansas do before, but to me, it all works. Changes tempo several times. Yeah, I really like it.
There are a lot of different sections. This is the longest song on the record. It's just a hair under 9 minutes. And it's got a few minutes before the vocals even come in. And it just has that classic Kansas prog playing. The funny thing is I have a friend who's in a band called Myriad, and they started in the late 80s, early 90s. And then in 2000, one of our favorite bands, my friend Eddie and I, Kansas released a song called Myriad. So I always thought that was funny, and so did he, that they had a song named after his band, but it wasn't named after his band. But this is a great song, and I think a lot of people think this is the best song on the record. I have another personal favorite. This is probably my number 2, but this is classic Kansas. And if you haven't heard anything from Somewhere to Elsewhere, I know it's on some of the streaming services. This is on Spotify. Definitely play the song Myriad because it's well worth 9 minutes of your time.
Yeah. I mean, it's even got a Steve Walsh scatting section in the middle of it, which I don't think that was on anybody's bingo card for this album, but it's great. It's great. And again, he's pushing his vocal to the limit on this. The final chorus modulates up and he sounds great. No, this one really stood out to me on this album. Another one of my favorites is the next song.
Oh yeah.
And this is where we get to hear how good of a lead vocalist maybe for the first time. I know he sang in seventh key, and I know he's done lead vocals, but Billy Greer takes the lead vocal on "Look at the Time," and I think this is a great, and it sounds like a classic Kansas song too.
And it's also very, I always thought it was very Beatlesque.
It is, yeah. It's got Beatlesque elements in it, yeah.
And I love the call and response vocals and the chorus and the verses.
Yeah.
And it's a great song. It has great playing. And this has Dave Hope on bass and Billy Greer on lead vocals. So it's the only time that ever happens on a Kansas record.
Yeah. That's fantastic too. To me, there's a spirit of teamwork here. It just works. And Billy Greer always struck me as the type of guy that wasn't going to be like, I'm the bass player in Kansas. He's not coming back to. No, it's like, you're Dave Hope. You're the reason I have a job. Go ahead, play on all the tracks. Yep. I'll sing backups or whatever. That's the impression I get anyway. Next one, you mentioned how Grand Finale is kind of a bluesy song. They really go all in on blues with Disappearing Skin Tight Blues. Again, another Robbie vocal, which is, there weren't enough of those, I don't think.
Well, you get two great ones on here. And this is another long song. It's 7 minutes long, this song. Robbie turns in a great performance. There's some nice violin playing, and it's in the blues vein, but it's definitely a good, elongated, proggy blues song, if you want to call it that. A new genre. Yeah.
But then again, I mean, they always kind of tackled this on, something like Lonely Street. I mean, that was like a dirty, heavy blues, but it was in them. It was in their DNA to do a song like this. And I like the fact that Carrie can come up with song titles that really nobody else would. Who's going to? Yeah, I think what's this one called? Disappearing Skin Tight Blues.
What?
You say that in the song? No. But anyway, I digress. I think another one of the classic sounding Kansas songs on here, and they did this one, and I know they did this one in Icarus II when the album was out, but Distant Vision. Your thoughts?
This is my favorite song on the record.
It's pretty great.
I love this song. Another song where it's 8 minutes and 48 seconds. This is my favorite. This is epic. This is Prague with a capital P. And this is my favorite song on the album. In the Kansas catalog, I always thought that there were two transcendent moments. The first one is from going back to their debut album, and I want to refer to my notes here. On Journey from Myriad, the end of that song with Walsh screaming to the heavens, and you get Livgren on synth. Just the way Journey from Myriad ends is amazing, and it always gives me the shivers. And this song, Distant Vision, because this is a dual vocal, Walsh sings some of it, and Steinhardt sings some of it. And that whole middle section from like 5 to 8 minutes, where it's Robbie on the vocal, and the music in the background, I just think, and his violin playing and the keyboard playing, it's beautiful, it's amazing. And to me, that's the other transcendent moment on this song, Distant Vision, in the Kansas catalog. I just think it's one of the most beautiful pieces of music during that 2.5, 3 minute stretch. It's great. I love it.
Isn't that great too, that when a band can do that so far along into their career?
And it's Livgren's songwriting. It's Kerry's songwriting.
Yeah.
That's what it is here. And he still had it. He still has it.
Yeah. So next we have Byzantium. My doctor prescribed that to me. Anyway, what do you think of this?
It does sound like a medication.
Yeah.
I like Walsh's vocal on this song. It's low key, and it almost sounds Native American, this song. And I think it might be a tribute to the Native American Indians. Don't take that the wrong way. The Native Americans in America and their plight, which is something that Kansas often wrote about. Basically, Kerry wrote about it a lot.
Model.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And I like when the drums come in. Ehart, a great drummer. He has some great fills on this album. Not this song in particular, the next one, but we'll get to that in a moment. And also on When the World Was Young, Ehart's drums on When the World Was Young. I neglected to say that. Amazing drummer. His fills are excellent. But just when the drums kick in and on this song, It's a really good song. It's an underrated song on the album.
Yeah, for sure. Then we get to the last song on the album, Not Man Big. This is this is a typical Kerry Livgren lyric, I think, and I really like the vocal treatment they do. Steve Smits, who is in the book, Let It Be Your Guide, he was part of the gang chorus on this song.
Ah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
It's
what are your thoughts
cool
on this one, Not Man Big?
Lyrically, it seems weird and maybe a tad silly, but I love the music on the song. Is really good. It has that sort of gang vocal chorus, the call and response again, but I like the playing, and Ehard's drums, almost the end of the song, is sort of an excuse to almost give him a drum solo. He's got some great drum fills and drum work on this song. So musically, I like it. Lyrically, Not Man Big. I'm not sure what that means, if it fits in with the loose concept of the record, but I like this song.
I've always taken it to mean like there's no way a man could have created this. So it's not man big, it's bigger. That's kind of my interpretation. And knowing that Kerry wrote it is sort of how but yeah, it is an interesting way of putting it. So now we're in the era, we've been in the era of the hidden tracks on CDs. And if you let this thing play, well, you get a little, I'm going to call it a ditty about, and I guess you could call it Kerry Livgren on lead vocals on how he wants to live in a geodesic dome. I laughed so hard when I first heard this because I think it was probably about my third or fourth time listening before I realized, because normally, a song fades out, I take the CD out.
Right.
But this little bonus track going on. What are your thoughts on this little piece here?
See, I have written down here, down home, laid back acoustic blues on the porch. Just acoustic guitars and very low vocals. And you have to turn up the volume to hear it. And it's a typical weird bonus track. And they're also showing that we might be great players, great instrumentalists, but we do have a sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoy it for what it is. Just, it's just a little diversion. And, I absolutely love the Prelude Implicit and The Absence of Presence. I just wish we got 2 or 3 more records in between. I just wish we had a little bit more Kansas to talk about. But, they broke the drought. And I listened to this for very many years. And fortunately, it's available again, issued on vinyl with a slightly different cover. I think I like the original one better, but I like the concept of it. I like the fact that
but it has the logo on the new record. Can you hold up your record again?
Well, they both have the logo.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that on the original, you've got like the ghost pilot standing in front of the plane. But anyway, it's colorful. I like the way the logo looks. I like so on the back. So here we have the back of the CD. The original CD looks like this. And it's the same, I think, image on the back cover of this, but I do like the coloring better.
Yeah, it pops more. It stands out more.
Yeah. So no complaints there. However, you need to get this album. If you don't have it in your Kansas collection, you really need to get it. And there you go. That is our look at 2000s Somewhere to Elsewhere.
It is highly recommended. And on my channel, Cretin Classics, I did a ranking of the Kansas studio albums. And if you want to check it out, you'll see where I placed this. Hint, it's not towards the bottom, and that's all I'm saying. Great album. Highly recommended.
Be sure to like and subscribe to Cretin Classics for sure. Thanks, Davey, for sitting in once again on the deep dive. Don't forget, folks, if you're a Kansas fan, you want a good read, Let It Be Your Guide, the Kansas album review. Lots of great panelists in this. It's not just me going on and on, but available wherever country you live in. It's available on your local Amazon. Thank you very much for all the support. Davey, thanks for sitting in.
A lot of great Easter eggs on the cover.
Yes.
Even hidden ones that you have to look closely to spot, and on the back cover too.
And there's something from this album we just talked about on here. So that was the idea. So thank you very much, Davey, for sitting in. And folks, we are winding down. We've got 2 more albums to talk about, and we'll get there when we get there. Thank you for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Go listen to some Kansas.